Here we are back again with Brook answering viewers' questions. We've got a couple of questions here from Daryl. Now, Daryl has 81 NHR. It's got 40 mil Delortos, got pod filters on it, Conti pipes, very standard, much like my bike.
Yeah,
basically that.
almost identical.
Yes. Now, he's got some general questions. When tuning a standard compression 900 with Contis, do you recommend a particular jet size or a direction if you're more interested in power rather than fuel economy? I mean, we'll assume he's at stock, which could be, 60, or for his pilot, and he's probably got one, he hasn't said. If it's an 81, what would he have? Either a 152 or something?
Yeah, 148.
Up in that area?
148.
So for power, maybe. Is there anything to improve power?
So to answer that, Daryl, when the engine is running at its optimum, and it's nice to ride and it's running properly, it's not going to get more power by changing the carburetor configuration. All it's going to do is run badly. That ain't going to have more power. It'll probably get more fuel,
right,
but it won't make more power and it won't be nicer to ride. So when the carburetor is set up with the correct AFR ratio, air fuel ratio for that engine, that is the best it's going to run, and those settings are documented.
And that's normally the stock jetting and so on.
And look, there's a little bit of variation, Rob, as you found.
Yeah.
But I mean, at the end of the day, as we both found, you can fudge it and tickle it as long as you like, but get it running so it's nice to ride and it runs well. That's as good as you're going to get it.
Yeah.
And anything, if you want to change the power of the bike, you can't do it by changing the carburetor.
Right.
This carburetor settings. You can do it by changing the carburetor, by putting an FCR on it.
Right.
That's a different thing because it's changing the formula and the way the fuel is introduced into the engine and it burns at a different rate. It creates more of an explosion because the fuel and the air is mixed in a different way. That's a different thing. A standard Delorto, which is what's on Daryl's bike, if it's set properly with and it's got the right air fuel ratio, that's as good as it's ever going to go, and it's definitely the best it's ever going to run.
With that, again, down to jetting here, do you, and I guess he's referring to the stock. Okay. Would you run larger jets in the vertical cylinder at all, or the same in both? And I suspect he might be referring to the fact that, say, on my bike, which had the BD and BS carbs, the 40s, and the original spec did actually have I've got it listed, but I can't remember. I've got a 135 and a 140.
Correct.
And one of them is...
The factory did do that.
Yes. And now with that in mind, is there any benefit in that? Would you do that or always just run the same?
I've not found any benefit in it, and I've tested on the dyno substantially, done substantial testing, and I can't measure the difference. Like the carburetors on a Bevel drive are not exactly, the front one in particular, are not exactly in a perfect place. And if you look at how the air goes past the end of the carburetor, the trumpet end, the inlet, on the front carburetor versus the rear, and if it's got air cleaners on it, this really becomes irrelevant. But when those bikes came out and were marketed, they had bell mounts on them with gauzes over them, and it does matter because that gauze, that carburetor on the front cylinder is sticking out at an angle and the air is coming straight over it, and that is a perfect Venturi. The only problem is the Venturi's going the wrong bloody way.
Yes.
So I have put little shields behind to stop the air on my race bikes,
Yeah.
and I've gone to a lot of trouble to create a massive amount of air in the dyno room, like a wind tunnel situation.
Yeah.
And the difference is just huge. And yes, you do need to run different jets in the front and rear. So on a 750 or 900 SS that came from the factory with an air with a trumpet sticking out at an angle, causing a Venturi effect to stop the air going down the hole, and then one behind the engine shielded by the whole thing, but getting hot air off the engine, for sure. I suspect that's what the engineers were doing. They were trying to compensate for the fact that one was trying to get the air sucked out of it, because of the Venturi effect, and the other one was getting hot air off the back cylinder everywhere around it. So I think...
And the pods obviously cancel that out.
Yes, So I know that people say, oh, it's supposed to have a different main jet in the front and rear. Well, I think that's not true. I don't think that's true.
Yeah.
I don't think it makes any difference.
But
I can understand why they did it, and it was like a stab in the dark of making it maybe better.
Yeah. In the end, on my bike, I went stock. And the only jet I changed was the idle jet, because I was trying to go pilot jet, because I was focusing on that first eighth of the
Yes, the way that it comes off idle, as you found, is very, very much affected by the size of the pilot jet and the position of the air screw.
Yes.
And I tune them by ear because I've done it a lot of times, and I can tell by feeling the throttle whether that bike is right or not. And I know one that's good, and then of course you have the variations in ignition timing, which affects the way it comes off idle. So, and I've done a lot of experimenting with that. And
that leads straight on to Daryl's last query. Do you use the standard static factory ignition timing? I'm not sure if that refers to whether he's got Bosch units in there or what.
Well, that's a minefield. But Daryl, I don't know what your ignition's got on your bike, but I'd need to know that to advise you. And I have done a lot of research and a lot of testing on ignition curves, start and finish points of ignitions versus compression ratios and jetting and all that. So,
say it was a Bosch unit.
If it's a Bosch system, unfortunately, you're never going to get it right, and you're never going to get it consistent. Because of many reasons. And I mean, if you want to contact me, I can document them or tell you. But the bottom line is that ignition is flawed the day it left the factory, and not Bosch's fault entirely. Back then, maybe the request of what we need from the Ducati factory was not very detailed, or not detailed enough, and that ignition system runs on a Laverda, and doesn't give anywhere near the problems it gives in a Bevel drive.
Right.
And why is that? Because the factory neglected to tell Bosch that, well, actually these pickups are going to run in oil, hot oil.
Right.
And the pickup is not designed to run hot oil, and neither is the wiring to it. That's a problem.
Yes.
And whose fault's that? Well, Bosch said, well, you didn't tell us. And they said, well,
Really?
100%.
How that ended up in there.
So the glue that holds them together, and it all falls apart, and the wiring rots, and it's a horror show.
Dear.
So, if I get an engine rebuild in these days, and I will not do the engine rebuild unless it gets a new ignition.
Yeah.
Because I can't make the thing run nice and good and have him happy and have it usable to my anyone's and rideable unless I change it. The point system is okay, but the mechanical bob weight is never going to be as good as a digital one
Yeah.
because it'll never come back at the same point. It'll always advance at a slightly different position or rate. It's not, it'll give you a linear curve to a degree, but not really. The points gap changes half a thou, and the timing changes. The points gap changes the ignition
On a
timing
Bosch.
dramatically. Not on a points. That's why I'm saying I won't use them
You
because
mean on original point?
on original points, yeah,
No,
on
not
a 750 round case.
Yeah, yeah.
The
Right.
points gap is crucial, and it will always be changing. So don't want to use it. On a Ducati electronica system, the spark, especially these days, that is a self-generating system. So it'll run without a battery. You can take every piece of wiring out of an 860 engine, which is an SS, 77, 76, 860, whatever. You can take all the wiring out of the bike and it'll start and run. No problem. Because it's got its own generator in there. The flywheel has got magnets in it and generates the current for the ignition. The only thing is, it's 2024 and those magnets were made in
70s.
1975
Yeah.
on a good day, and it's the same stuff as they use in a bloody fridge magnet that holds holds your door closed on a fridge. It's like flexible, horrible stuff. And they've lost their magnetism.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't have any magnetism, it doesn't have any power. Won't generate the voltage that it needs. So they just aren't up to it, and they're old. So ditch it and put a. And the other thing about those things is that they've only got 2 points that they spark at.
Yeah.
So it idles at 10 degrees, and then at 2,800 revs,
Goes to-
roughly, now and again, it goes bang up to 38 degrees.
Yeah.
Maybe, or 40, or 36, or 5, or
Yeah.
46, or whatever.
Yeah.
No good.
So the answer there really is not so much about ignition timing, but if you're running an old ignition, just don't.
Well, don't spend hours and hours of your life trying to make it run good, because there's millions of people that have done it, including me.
I did it, tried.
And we're not talking about an opinion here, we're talking about fact.
Yeah.
It's not, if you put a square wheel on your car, it's going to give you a shit ride.
Yeah. Just in case he's got an ignition, or you've been using the Sachs ignition a lot, in that case, you know how the Sachs has the 10 or so positions, I can't remember how many.
Yeah.
Just off the top of your head, you normally set it on, was it the 5th?
Yes. So the thing about the Sachs ignition and the curves that they supply,
Yes.
the big thing that makes a difference to the way the bike runs and makes it crisp when you crack the throttle, makes it return to idle when you let the throttle go, and doesn't get hot when you're running it flat out, are the start point and the finish point. With the ignition curves in that box, what's happening in the middle, it does affect it to some degree for sure, but not to where you can go, wow, it accelerates from 40 kilometres an hour to 110 kilometres an hour, much better on curve 6 and 7.
Right.
Bullshit. There's no way anyone would be able to tell you.
Right.
You might measure it on a dyno,
Yeah.
and if you look at the graph and the picture, you know, they are substantially different, but whether it's starting at 5 degrees or 10 degrees, or and the finish point is about the heat that the engine will run at, and when it's and of course it's maximum power, or that will change, and that maximum power and the heat is about how efficient the burn is in the cylinder. So if the burn in the cylinder and the combustion is very effective, the spark can be fired later. So the piston is further up, it goes bang, and the event happens very fast, and it gets to maximum pressure in the cylinder and puts maximum pressure on the piston to create the work on the piston to push it down. The reason, so you would think, oh well, why don't they spark it at top dead centre? At the top, why don't they spark it there? Because that would give it, well, much more, but it doesn't. Because the burn rate is what I'm talking about. When you throw the match in there and it lights, it takes a time for it to start burning and gain pressure. So you want that to happen at a rate, well, the faster the better, and that's twin plugs, high voltage at the plug, like the 5 fast. And if it's going to be a fast burn, you can light it later, and you still get the good pressure on the piston. But if it's a slow burn, you need to light it early when the piston's down. So although you've lit it here and the piston's still coming up, it's slowly building up pressure, and it has time to get to maximum pressure when you have the most maximum effort over the crank with the piston. So if you talk about high compression engine, and does that affect it? Yes, that's why compression gives it more grunt, because it makes the burn faster, and you can bring the ignition timing further up, so you're creating less negative work on the piston.
And so
what I'm saying is that this start point here, they aren't all that different.
yeah, I can see they're mostly
And but the end points are, because that is your degrees. So this one, that is for twin plug heads.
The blue one here.
Yeah, that's for twin plug heads, because it's up around 28 degrees, and the burn on twin plug heads is very, very fast.
Right. So that
comparison
reaches 28 at like
2800,
and then it stays all the way.
It just rockets up there.
Right.
And that's why, because the burn rate. And because you've got
fast.
The flame front was fast. The other thing that's happening as the RPM goes up is that the airspeed in the port and the exhaust is increasing to the max. So you're getting a much bigger charge in there, and you just need to,
your burn cycle is always the same though, isn't it?
The burn cycle is
never speeds up, it's just
the burn cycle is the same.
That greenish there, is that one up there?
I find that one is very good on a lot of bikes.
That's 5. I think that's what you had mine on.
Yeah. And what did you change it
I
to?
think I came on, I had a feeling I tried 2, which is the orange.
Yeah.
See, it just drops it.
And the problem with that,
I think it was the light orange. I just went to where it didn't go quite so far.
You're not running
Such
running your bike on full noise, and you're not too concerned about the fact that that it's down 32 or 34 degrees.
Right.
Whereas if you're on a racetrack, you would.
Right.
So, actually your bike has got very good compression, and it's a little bit above standard. So your standard compressions are up around 38, and the more compression you have, the lower you can bring this down, and the lower you bring that down, the less negative work on the piston.
Because the temperature?
Well, as long as it's burning properly, the temperature will be fine.
For all of these?
Yeah.
The same?
Yeah. Yeah.
I think I set it back to 5. I didn't notice anything significant.
Well, I don't think the difference in these rates is not huge, is it? See, that is not.
Yeah, I know
that
it's all sitting in there.
Yeah,
it's all sitting in there, and then it's all sitting in there.
That's what I'm saying. I don't.
Just that these stop.
Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
They reach maximum there, and then those don't. They're way over there, and as you say, the twin spark reaches maximum there.
Yeah.
Ooh. Any comment on these ones that dip in the middle?
I don't know. I honestly, I think that I'd be reluctant to comment on that in public.
They might have some engine that's for, like as you say, that's the twin spark.
Maybe for a different racetrack. Different. Like you want the power.
Yeah.
It's not a flat out track, and you want grunt out of a corner.
Right.
You know that could be right.
But so generally 5, as you set it on, is typically fine.
Typically 5 is okay.
Yeah.
And look, I have really done a lot of testing on different curves and those ignitions and on the dyno and riding them, and that's what I found. I do a lot of seat of the pants stuff, which is probably against the rules, but
No, that's all right. It's the experience part.
there's other ignitions that are that are available as well. But I use that system because I did help the original inventor, designer, and owner of the Sachs was a guy called Volker.
Mm-hmm.
And I went to Volker and asked him to make. He was Laverda. He was a Laverda nut.
Right.
He made an ignition for his own Laverda.
Ooh.
That's all he did. He wasn't looking at it commercially. It became commercial for Laverdas. This guy was a mechatronics expert, which is something that if I was young enough, I'd do.
Yes, basically robotics.
I would do that and robotics.
Yeah.
Robotics, because it's better. So Volker was as passionate as I am about Ducati Bevel drives about Laverdas. And the Laverda system ain't real flash. So he goes, well, I can do this, I'm going to make an ignition. He did, and it was really great, much better. And he put it on his Laverdas, and he put it on his mates' Laverdas, and he put it in the German Laverda club's Laverdas, and they were all happy. And I actually bought one because a mate of mine had a Laverda, and I thought, bloody hell, this is what we need on a Ducati.
Yeah.
And get rid of those Lucas readers and all that stuff. So I contacted him, and I was going to Germany, and I went there, saw him, met his wife, Crystal, who's a really nice lady. And he said, look, I can't do that, Brook. He said, I've got a normal job, and and I don't have any hardware to mount the stuff on to make it.
Yeah.
I can't do the R&D. And I said, Volker, I can send you anything you want for any model Ducati, crankcases, crankshafts, whatever, and you can have it in your shed. I don't even want it back. You can have it. If you can make an ignition. Oh, well, we could do that. And that's what happened.
Right.
So I sent him all the stuff.
Yeah.
And he made it. And then he went to work one day and got hit up the back on his Laverda and died.
Oh, Lordy.
Volker had a very good friend, and he had a very good friend that was riding motorbikes together, and Marco is the son of Volker's very good friend. And he bought and took over the business from Crystal, Volker's wife, sold to him, and he has added to it. He sells shock absorbers.
Right.
And what?
All right, Daryl, I hope that helps you out with some of your queries. And if you're interested in any more of these Q&As, just check my channel. There's a whole lot more videos similar to this one. All right, we'll see you in the next one.